What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hapness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Brice Dong, and we speak about the heart connection in a corporate environment and how to drive true transformation, how to facilitate transformation. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free one-page summary. And now, lean back to be inspired. Brice, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Wow, thank you so much, Miriam. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, and we already got so deep into the conversation that I now had to click the record button quickly so that we have the audience on board.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the flow, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And to set up maybe a new flow, another one, I always like to start with the same question. Mm-hmm. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
That's really a fantastic, triggering question, isn't it? I actually don't really call myself a facilitator, despite that my work has a lot of elements in, fostering flow, maybe. Right. So I love the element of like seeing the flow and seeing something beautiful emerge from conversations, from dialogues, even from unspoken movements, sometimes. I just see because I have quite many elements in my work, because, I love the system elements. So it's on the one hand, the depth of the individual exploration, but on the other hand, also the system. So I guess, I'm not a kind of a facilitator, or I wouldn't call myself a facilitator in a certain setting, but perhaps really, someone who fosters a system flow. I would love that kind of, work to facilitate the flow in the system.
Thank you. And the image that comes up for me, and I heard flow a couple of times and would love to dig a little bit deeper into what that means. And what I hear is you have the individual that you enable, and the magic only happens if the different individuals meet together in a system. And I would be curious what you mean by system.
Yeah. And I guess when I mention system, it's really depending on the setting then, right? So sometimes when there are smaller groups in a leadership development session, for example, it's almost like these maybe 12 people, 15 people create a system in that container. And as we mentioned previously about what I find the beauty of the connection in people, often cases beyond the cognitive head connection or brain connection, there is also the beauty of the heart connection. So I guess in that system, maybe it's really the system or the container that people create. Meanwhile, there's also larger system or organizational setting that I also feel quite curious about in exploring. How do we create connection, create trust in larger systems? So I guess it's really the both.
And then the communication between these two systems.
Indeed.
And I wonder, to what extent is it the group that defines or sets the system? And what is the role of the facilitator, the host, to actually create this container and to hold it? Because when I hear head versus heart connection in the same sentence as I hear leadership meeting, I'm like, okay, let me imagine the heart connection
right
within a leadership team. It almost sounds like utopia. How do you get them to connect to the heart? How do you allow them to create a container where they can connect through the heart?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And indeed, this is an area that really close to my heart. I can actually start with a story where actually a real life story in a leadership like leadership development experience. So it's not a business meeting that I experienced this heart connection. It's actually during a dialogue that a group of leaders come together to explore what is needed, if we evolve towards a more self-organization, towards more agile world. What's the role of a leader? What is the identity of a leader, right? What is the story of a leader? So that's really the container that this story happens. And when I personally felt the heart connection, it really started with us using like the narrative identity to actually tell our own story. What is my identity, especially in light of the agile transformation that we are embarking on, and when we are working more and more in self-organized teams. Often cases, leaders might, or how we call them, typical people managers might actually have some questions like, if we're going on self-organization path and, going towards the teal direction, where's my role, And often in that cases, that's when we started to explore what's the identity. And my story that I love to share in that experience was when a group of, I think, 11 or 12 leaders together, and these are country heads or general managers in several countries coming together, sharing their own stories of their transformation journey, of their own transformation as well. And what
personal transformation.
Personal, yes. What touched me the most was actually a leader who has been in this organization for, I think, 30 years. And he shared about his personal crisis, actually, when he and his team embarked on this journey, like he felt lost for a certain period of time. It's like, what is my value? In the sense, not coming just from an ego kind of centric way, but really, if I want to serve, where's my role, right? Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of when he shared about his personal crisis in a way, and shared about, he found a coach to actually support him along the journey. And he did many co-creation sessions with his leadership team, right, in figuring out how could they collectively support the country team, right? So that's really the story of the personal kind of and the heart connection that I appreciate a lot.
Beautiful. And what I hear, it works because it's easily then transferable to the organizational context. So if a leader can connect to their own transformation and the pain and the need for an anchor, and the anchor being their own values, and then creating through this own experience empathy for what the organization as a whole and every individual in this organization is going through, then it becomes kind of the foundation of a very valuable leadership conversation. And what I also hear from what you said is that the container that you referred to beforehand is created through a meaningful question.
Indeed. Yeah, that's really a beautiful way to explore. Because as I tell the story, I also started to reflect. So what are the ingredients that actually created such a container for heart connection, right? And I definitely resonate with the element of empathy, right? And also compassion. It's a level of self-compassion and compassion to the situation. There is a level of connecting to one's own value and actually connecting that value with what we are doing here in the workplace, right? And also the question of what is my identity in this journey?
And I wonder, so what I experienced often, unfortunately, is the moment we open this container and invite, especially the middle-aged, standard, stereotypical leaders, in air quotes, to embark in such a self-reflection and a heart connection, what we encounter as facilitators very often is resistance. I don't want to go there. Why should I talk about myself, right? We're here to talk leadership and strategy and about the organization. No one cares about my own transformation. And just now, I was actually wondering whether this might be a symptom of midlife crisis. So when I am not sure about my identity. If I'm insecure, maybe, and then I'm invited in such a container, this doesn't feel safe. So how do you prepare that ground? Or have you maybe also experienced something like that? And what was your approach?
For sure. And that's also, as you mentioned about, the midlife crisis or resistance. And that's where actually the compassion element for me personally is so important, because we are all human beings and we all experience personal crisis one time or the other, right? So I guess as a facilitator in that creating that container, it's really how am I opening my heart in creating the container? So that's my first thoughts. In answering your question. There's, of course, an important element I feel, and this is also what I appreciate a lot in my setting. I work in Hoffmann La Roche, this pharmaceutical company, and what I resonate very, very much is the passion for, creating benefits for patients. And in this particular story that I shared was really like a story that happened like last year. And the overall setting of this leadership dialogue is really for the outcome that we want to achieve for benefiting the patients, right? So we set up we call the vision, right? So we're 3 to 5 times patient benefits at half the cost to society. So I personally resonate a lot in contributing to this vision. But of course, I understand like how to make this really land into your daily life. That really needs the down to earth approach as well, right? And in this occasion, what I shared, this overall company purpose, like this, the connection there, perhaps is really the most solid grounding for people to start to connect, and then sharing the individual purpose. I feel that's really quite important.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess, even when I talk with my colleagues and people in the organization, and I recently talked with somebody else, a scientist in our early development department, who are surrounded by people from
academics,
yeah, right? Very, very
I know these
brain-driven people. It's like, So I do appreciate, I tend to be quite idealistic, that I really do believe in this and I feel passionate contributing to this. I guess it's really also that level of openness and curiosity and compassion to say, let me learn more about your approach. Let me learn about what actually might trigger you to share something, or what might trigger, positively or negatively, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of my approach of using the compassion and curiosity, to connect.
Yes. The curiosity, I think that's so important. Before we hit the record button, we were speaking a little bit of what it is that makes a great conversation. And me as a podcast host, of course, I'm obsessed by what it is that makes a great conversation. And I think that leadership teams must equally be obsessed with having great conversations. In theory, I think, because from great conversations comes great insight. And then how can you spark this curiosity for each other? As you just mentioned, it's compassion and making it relatable.
Yeah, I guess that's really the journey perhaps many leaders are going through. Like when you share this, the first thing that came to my mind is actually perhaps a journey inside first, like really the self-awareness of a person. Because when we are sort of connected with our own purpose, first of all, when we are clear with our own purpose, what is my purpose, right? When a leader, if he or she can be clear with his or her own purpose, then like I feel there's a grounding for this person to actually reach out and connect outside.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, it's first having that level of awareness. It's really, that's also why I appreciate the word self, like the personal transformation. And when we talk about transformation in an organizational sense, it will not happen if there is no personal transformation first. So we even like in during our transformation journey, we even actually like really started to tell the story that it starts with me. So for the leader to explore inward, and then actually invite a curiosity for the leader to connect with the surrounding.
Yeah.
We even raised the concept that actually everybody is a leader, right? So we actually all have leadership qualities. It's not just the people managers, right? You know, in this case, when I share the story, it happened to be that we have like this container with people who are people managers, and how do they find their identity in this transformation journey, right? Yeah.
Totally. What comes to my mind is the concept that we cannot take people to places we haven't been ourselves. And this can be a tour guide. We apply it very often to the work of facilitators or coaches. And from what I just heard from you, it certainly applies to leaders. So how can a leader guide an organization through a transformation if they haven't been through the pains of transformation themselves?
Indeed. And that's exactly resonating with it starts with me, right?
Yes.
And the personal journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's scary. I think the big question of what's your purpose? That's frightening. I mean, many of us are looking for it until the final day. And then taking maybe the pressure out that the purpose doesn't have to be the big one and the scary one, but it can be a small one to just contribute in a meaningful way and then empower them.
Yeah. And also it doesn't have to be exactly the same words, right? With the company's purpose. So taking myself as an example, you know, I actually had a conversation earlier today. We were talking about, do we all have to like say, this is absolutely my life purpose about patients and about benefit, about ecosystem, about healthcare. So I must say, you know, for me personally, my purpose when it comes to like, I feel very strongly about creating space for reflection, for awareness. Therefore, our wisdom can flow. And in this process, I must say, in the transformation journey, I actually work a lot with employee experience, right? So, and what actually brings my passion to life is when we are creating those connections of our own people, right? The hard connections within the organization, then our people can take care of the stakeholders, right? The customers, the patients. So in that way, in this avenue, I'm contributing to the company's purpose, right? And I'm holding very clearly my value and my purpose. So I guess that's really sort of creating, in many ways, I see my role or my colleagues similar to my in the workspace, you know, supporting organizational transformation is actually creating such space and avenue for people to actually express their value and purpose and make some connections with the organization's value and purpose.
What I hear is that it's less about the aligning or assimilating the values or the purpose. It's more about integrity. So that we hold our values, we're grounded in our personal values, and those that we are working by or living by on a daily basis that we are supporting for the company are aligned so that we can be persons of integrity by working for that company and pursuing their values and goals. And I would be curious because you mentioned the word flow a couple of times, and the way how I somehow picture what you just described about creating spaces for heart connection to happen and people to relate to the work they do in the higher meaning. It sounds like flow. It sounds And for me, the opposite of flow would be kind of obstacles or making it difficult. So you're not moving forward. So what is it that flow means to you, and how do you create flow or use flow in your work?
Ah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for this question. I guess flow for me, I love the word actually. Flow for me is something that's naturally expressing. So, like, I do have very strong faith that as human beings, we do want to do better. Like, we do want to have positive outcomes. We do want to help others, right? So we do want to do good in the workplace, right? So I guess in many ways, flow for me is to help such a natural instinct of human beings to actually naturally express it themselves, and hopefully create the container for such a expression to land meaningfully into something that we do. Hopefully also create something meaningfully that our customers and our, people, in that case of my company in Roche, that the medicine can be used and the medicine can save lives. So it's really sort of starting from this positive intent of a human being to help facilitate the whole process for it to land in something tangible.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And of course, coming back to this topic, and I did, when I look at the topic, heart connection in the corporate world. So even when I talk with our, scientist colleagues, they will say, I can hear that you're an idealistic person, right? So the world is not always rosy. As you say, there are not always like that. And there are, especially in times of, turbulences. If you look at the world, there's a lot of fear. In times of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear and anxiety even, right, in the environment. So I guess that's why I find myself talking about this even more in times of uncertainty. Because, like, when a lot of things are moving and changing, when a lot of not so ideal situations are happening, for me personally, I need that sort of inner sort of root to be even more deep in the ground and actually flourishing more. Because only by doing that, I could actually keep my root and my way of being in this world. And also, maybe like sending out some positive energy, right? And you can imagine, especially in such turbulent times, leaders in the organization. And that I don't only mean people managers, but actually leaders who are influential, who can be anybody, right? And they can be in the center of their network, connected network, and they can be influencious. And how they are with their own inner root and how they show up in the workplace can be very, very important, and people who trust them, we will take that inspiration, right? And for that, I would imagine it's like an exponential sort of impact that you can create. Anybody can create that.
Yeah. And it refers back to the mindset. Right? And when I think of roots, it's almost like a tree. If you have if you have a storm, the tree will be strong enough when it has strong roots going very deep into the ground. And then it won't fall. And then everyone can lean against the tree and feel safe.
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy. Yeah.
And still, I would like to play a little bit the devil's advocate, because I think that on behalf of the audience as well, and out of my own curiosity, the pushback we often get, especially as external facilitators, we come in and we say, okay, we need to slow down to speed up. We need to feel grounded and rooted in our own values before we can connect to the outer values. How do you communicate this process, and how do you help or force an organization to slow down? Because I think, especially in times of uncertainty, and especially for leaders, the instinct is doing. And I can feel it in myself. When I have stressful periods, I start doing things that are absolutely unnecessary. And then I have to force myself to go for a walk and to take longer breaks just to protect myself from myself and to take time to think and not to overdo. And I think that it's something that's instinctive for human beings, that when we actually have to, it's so counterintuitive that we need to slow down and reconnect to ourselves and others in uncertain times. What is your advice or maybe your magic trick?
Well, I cannot claim any magic trick, but I definitely resonate with the doing. What I definitely observe in our organization in sort of time of stress is overload, right? So it's like exactly the human tendency of do more to solve a issue. And when the whole system, imagine, 100, Roche as a whole has 100,000 employees, right? And if you have a system level of sort of frantic doing, then you create overload, and you create a lot of collaborative overload as well when we work with each other. So I definitely resonate. And part of my work in the organization is to really finding out the causes of collaborative overload on a system level, and explore sort of system level interventions.
Can you give an example?
It's really still in the process. I guess there are two areas. I wouldn't say two areas, really two dimensions. How from my sort of mind, that we are addressing it. One is actually on the individual level of the depth. So we introduce concepts of holistic well-being. Like we look at the individual's awareness of my own fear. And I have the fear of missing out tendency, right? And I actually in uncertain times, do I want to do 1, 2, 3, 4 before I can make a decision, right? So there are individual tendencies and character, or behavioral traits. Are they present, right? So the individual, that's one dimension. Another, I would like to actually see the system level. Are we having, either organizational structure or culture or collaborative sort of governance model that actually foster a situation like collaborative overload? From the initial findings from some sensing exercises, we did find some, but this is it's actually really ongoing, and the overload topic is being sort of amplified during the pandemic time, right? Hybrid working and also a lot of changes, geopolitical and sort of market changes. So this is very much present in our sort of daily work. And I also draw inspiration from Microsoft. The other day, I was reading an article from Harvard Business Review about Microsoft measuring employee thriving rather than just performance. And the thriving is actually a more holistic element of your whole overall well-being, right? So I think this question that you raise is I think is very much present. Perhaps that's not only just one company. I think the society is kind of battling this issue probably.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess in the sort of workshops, for example, that I help facilitate or I host, we for sure have sort of tune-in sessions where we either, I sometimes do sort of breathing exercises or mindfulness exercises to actually help people to shift their even physiological state. I sometimes would ask people to stand up, to actually do some movement, and
to open the body.
To open the body, yes. And I also very much advocate sort of these micro practices in between meetings. In my sessions, I typically do tune in and I do tune like a check-in or check-out, right? So even in the check-out sessions, it's sort of creating maybe even just 1 minute. If we could help people to actually shift their physiological state, therefore shift their mind state so that they can be somatically more sort of tuned to their body, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully by doing that, we are opening the doors for heart connections. Yeah.
Can you give an example? What would you do as a check-in little exercise and a check-out exercise? Tune in, tune out.
Yeah. I mean, tuning could be really just very simple of standing up and observing your breathing. Like really, I might ask people to, if you want to close your eyes, you can. And just really notice the breath coming into your body. And you can notice your lungs expanding and releasing. And you even notice your body almost like expanding and releasing. And just really take a few seconds to bring your awareness into your body. Sometimes I use sound, or sometimes I would use touch, like sensations of your hand. If you would notice your hand touching, you can feel the texture. You could even feel the temperature, right? And you could feel that the warmth coming in the palm. So it's really that moment of bringing your energy from your cognitive mind to your body. Because like it's really, maybe perhaps because I'm rather a kinesthetic person, that I really enjoy the somatic sort of interventions, even micro ones, to actually just notice, right, that moment. It can just be a split of a second that your mind is coming to your body. And then when we start the conversations, I would also invite, like maybe use words that are more sort of connecting. And I guess sometimes I even reflect on myself. Am I kind of being more sort of utopia type of style in a corporate environment, right? Well, I mean, as long as this works, why not? Yes. Right? So, and I was telling a story like this afternoon to a scientist colleague, that there was one story that really hugely inspired me several years ago, that a colleague at that time shared with me. He is a engineer in his 50s. He worked 28 years in a German engineering company. So he's a very hardcore German engineer, right? And he shared a picture with me that really so inspired me. This picture is basically a heart holding a hand of a brain. So you might have seen this picture somewhere in LinkedIn, right? A heart holding hand with a brain. And this was shared to me by a German engineer with 28 years in the company. And I'm like, this is just so inspiring that we are all human beings. We do not need to compartmentalize, like who is supposed to be a certain way, right? And that gave me the faith to be a little bit idealistic in hosting some sessions with, I used to host sessions with room full of PhDs, and I'm the only one who doesn't have a PhD in the room. And I just got many, many positive signals that kind of reinforce my faith going forward.
Thank you for sharing all these layers. Because I just realized, just doing this breathing exercise with you, you allowed me to just land in this space and this conversation differently, almost renewed. And then the experience of touch, it's short, and it basically reminds us of our own body and system. We set the focus differently. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine, as a shared experience, yes, it's a quick reminder of our shared humanity. And I wonder whether, as you said, these micro interventions, taking a breath together at the beginning of a session, maybe it sounds woo-woo, but at the end of the day, we're sharing a moment together, and we're realizing, okay, we're all humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, just to add to that, I guess the most weird thing that I've done is, with a room of PhDs, to eat a raisin for 10 minutes together in one of the leadership sessions. And that's in one of my previous roles. And like, I thought, why not? Let's try that. So, it's from the mindfulness 8-week course, right? So you eat a raisin mindfully. So you literally eat that in 10 minutes, from the look to the touch, even to the sound. We literally took the raisin to squeeze it in front of my ears and listen to that. And then we ate that. So and then after we finished the whole journey, so it's a leadership development journey, I received some feedback from the audience. And one of the comments that really left an impression, and he said, we asked, what is the most memorable moment that you have along the whole journey? That was 9 months, right? And he said, did he use the weird word? So it's like something that he thought was really strange about the raisin. But actually, after 9 months, when he started to learn a little bit more and more about the mind training and the mindfulness exercise, and he started to appreciate it more, even in his work in research. Because you can imagine, actually, in some of the fundamental research, you really need to have quite a tranquil mind in order to be creative. Right. So that was another experience that really started with some very weird moments of eating the raisin for 10 minutes.
And listening to the sound of a raisin.
Yes. I guess the squeezing was really the most weird. And yet, I guess it's really our common humanity, no matter who they are, that they started to appreciate the moment to bring our mind into the present moment and into our body.
Yeah. And this, I would like to point out two things that I noticed. One is the importance of the facilitator to hold the space and to believe, to have this faith. You mentioned the word faith a couple of times, and you being the only non-PhD in front of a group of PhD and they following you. I worked in universities almost my entire professional life in air quotes. So I know how it is to be amongst PhDs. It is tough. And you need this groundness and confidence in your own work so that they will trust you and follow you. So this I want to just acknowledge. That's one of the facilitator's superpowers, I think, to have this groundness and to believe in the work that you're doing. And the other one is the observation that sometimes we don't know what the impact of our work is, sometimes until months or even years after. So they might walk out and say, this crazy raisin exercise, what a waste of my time. And then suddenly the penny drops and there it is, the transformation. Right? So it's very difficult, actually. And this maybe then ties back to where we're coming from, the organizational development and organizational transformation. How do you know where the point is where you can leverage? And how do you know where and what to measure? Because it's, especially these kind of interventions, you're talking about transformation as something so personal, even on a systemic level.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I actually don't really have a definitive answer. I guess, when do I know? Often cases is intuition, I must say. I guess in my work in supporting the systemic transformation of the organization, I guess I listen to signals, and we do a lot of systemic sensing exercise throughout the organization, right? Different type of sensing, just to really understand what's going on.
Can you give an example, just for me to understand what an organizational sensing exercise is?
Right. So, for example, we have different ways of sensing. Well, in the recent transformation that we are working on, we have 4 types of sensing, and these are not they are not pre-designed. I think that's really one thing. They are really emerged. So when it started, I did not know we will do 4 types of sensing. It's just that at that point, when we wanted to know what's really happening, especially from a system level. So first, what we did was we did a survey, so really sort of the typical survey, and we did a Tableau kind of map, or world map of where people are. That's the first type of, okay, so that's maybe how it is. And then we wanted to understand, so what the deep stories, what's really happening, what are the concrete examples? So we did focus groups. and voluntary, like checking in with a country's, leadership team or some ambassadors, actually have deep conversations in 1.5 hours, in-depth conversation in understanding their stories. How does this work relate to how you connect with the external stakeholders, with customers? What kind of impact are you having? Right. So these kind of stories, that's second type. And that really emerged from the curiosity, again, coming back to, when we started the conversation, the curiosity in learning where we are. And then it also so happened that we were wondering, are there quiet voices that we are not hearing? Because, when we are sensing, you might hear all the loud voices who are super passionate, but they might be just, 20% of the organization. So what happens to the other 80%, right? So that's sort of the, wonder that again, the curiosity that we are having. So then we invited people to for a crowd sensing exercise that are quite different by not defining the topic, just defining a theme and asking people to ask questions to each other, right? So if we do that large scale, we wanted to understand, so what are the topics that people are curious about? And because this is anonymous, right? Question and answer. Mm-hmm. You also avoid this loud voice and this all by writing, right? So it's not by speaking. The second focus group is by speaking. And the third one is by writing. So then we wanted to hear what are the quieter voices or even the silence, right? So the silence also says something, right? So that's what we found out. And the fourth way is sort of what we always do is through the sort of individual conversations and sharing signals. And I'm now that I'm sharing these, I realize, in hindsight, we did look quite systemically in understanding what's going on. But at the time, it's really just all emerged. But I guess as a disclaimer, I'm part of the Roche that is commercial focused. So it's really 14,000 people. So it's not the whole of Roche that we did this exercise. But with this organization, we really, I guess the way that the transformation has worked is a lot of emergent steps that we took.
Yeah.
Rather than planned.
Which makes sense because these kind of things, you cannot force anyone. You cannot drag anyone along.
Yeah. And I guess this also reminds me of the word flow, right? So when it comes to facilitating a transformation journey, sometimes I guess sometimes people use the word change management. It's better to have something than not have something. That I admit, it's nothing against change management. But actually what we found out is in such a complex world, sometimes even chaotic situation, a lot is actually emergent. And a lot is not that you want to control and you can control. So in often cases, we do understand there are a lot of unknown situations. And that's why system thinking is so important. Even, when we are sort of starting this journey, it's really the awareness that we can set an intention, but actually really can't get there at the point that we want to get there. I don't know. I really don't know. Even now, if you ask me the things that we are working on, do we definitely get there? I can say we want to influence toward that direction. We want to sense the organization, the key elements that we want to capture in order to go for that direction. But I do not know. I really don't know, right? And I guess that might be really the beauty of trusting the North Star that we want to go there and actually having the faith of facilitating the flow in that case.
Hello, listener. Are you tired of listening to my podcast voice praising our sponsor Session Lab in each episode? I think it's time to pass the mic over to you. So if you are as much of a Session Lab fan and user as I am, please share your experience and praise, and don't be shy of add a sentence of self-promo. Send me your soundbite and you might hear yourself on the next show and find your name and URL in the show notes. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.